In the quiet stillness of Buckingham Palace, where ancient secrets sleep behind velvet curtains, a whisper has begun to echo. A whisper about a destiny unlike any other. Princess Charlotte, small in age, mighty in spirit, is said to be walking a path carved only for legends. And now King Charles has broken decades of royal silence to reveal a title so rare, so sacred, it has only ever been given to the most extraordinary heirs in royal history. The world expected tradition, but what he chose changed everything. If you're ready to journey deep into royal history, uncover emotional truths, and witness a title that could reshape the future crown, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and share it with fellow royal watchers. And seriously, grab a cup of tea. This story deserves a moment. History remembers kings in marble and queens in portraits, but the greatest royal legacies? They're often carried quietly by daughters. Princess Charlotte of Wales, born in a hospital room filled with hope and flashing cameras, entered a world where monarchy wasn't just tradition. It was expectation. It was duty stitched into every heartbeat of her lineage. Yet from her first breath, palace whispers marked her differently, not simply as the daughter of a future king, but as something we hadn't seen in generations. A royal girl stepping into a world finally ready to acknowledge her power. Because Charlotte wasn't born into the old rules. She wasn't raised in the shadow of only sons inherit. She arrived at the exact moment history decided daughters could stand shoulder to shoulder with kings. And her great-grandmother, the late Queen Elizabeth II, noticed. Staff recall how the Queen watched baby Charlotte in those early days with a certain softness, a knowing. She had forged her monarchy through storms, wars, scandals. And now, looking at Charlotte, it was as if she sensed a torch quietly passing. She once told a trusted aide, "Strong spirits follow strong blood." Charlotte's path was never going to be ordinary. Unlike heirs of centuries past, surrounded by strict governesses and silent corridors, Charlotte's world balanced royal polish with real childhood freedom. Tree climbing days at Anmer Hall. Ballet shoes by the nursery door. Books taller than she was stacked on cozy shelves waiting to be conquered. But watch closely, and you'd see something more. At official engagements, even as a toddler, Charlotte had what palace staff called the future leader stare. Focused, curious, a little fearless, the kind of energy you don't teach, only inherit. Royal guards, trained to notice everything, noticed her too. During Trooping the Color one year, Charlotte, tiny ribbons in her hair, stepped forward on the balcony, chin lifted, eyes scanning the regiment like she understood the weight of ceremony already. One guard later murmured, "There's a spark. You don't often see it that young." These weren't passing comments, they were quiet acknowledgments, the kind reserved only for the rare heirs who seem born aware of destiny. A legacy written before her. The British monarchy has always held ancient traditions, some sacred, some secret. And for centuries, only a few royal daughters earned historical reverence. Princess Victoria, elder daughter of George III, whose intelligence rewrote expectations. Princess Mary, daughter of George III, warrior of Wythowan hospitals and tireless duty. Princess Margaret, flawed but unforgettable, spirit unbreakable. Each one, a force. Each one, ahead of her time. And now, Charlotte's name sits in private palace archives beside theirs. Not in comparison, but in continuation. A lineage of royal daughters who weren't born to wait. They were born to shape. The quiet shift. When the Succession Act changed, allowing daughters equal right to inherit the throne, the world applauded. But inside palace walls, something deeper stirred. It meant the monarchy had officially entered a new era, one where heritage wasn't just preserved, it evolved. William and Catherine understood this, and they didn't raise their little girl as a symbol. They raised her as a future force, firm when needed, warm always. Aware she carried history, yet encouraged to explore childhood like any young spirit should. Because true power, it isn't loud at first. Sometimes it hums quietly beneath tiny shoes pattering through Kensington corridors. beneath giggles echoing across palace gardens. Charlotte's childhood wasn't casual. It was curated with love and destiny. A future queen in her own right. Maybe. A leader of a new kind. Undoubtedly. And somewhere inside Buckingham Palace, a title waited. Ancient, untouched for decades. Reserved only for those who would someday be more than royal. They would be legendary. And soon, King Charles would speak the words the world never expected. But before he did, one moment sealed Charlotte's place. And it happened not in a ballroom or ceremony, but before the eyes of the royal guard.
It happened on a brisk spring morning at Windsor, the kind where the air feels sharper, history feels heavier, and every stone seems to whisper its age. The royal family had arrived quietly. No cheering crowds, no blaring trumpets. Only the rhythmic stomp of the king's guard changing stations, boots striking the ground with military precision. William and Catherine walked ahead, chatting softly. George trotted by his father, half curious, half busy being a big brother. And Charlotte, little coat buttoned neatly, bow sitting proudly, walked with that unmistakable posture of hers, small in size, big in presence. Then it happened. A young guardsman, newly appointed, stern as ceremony demanded, stood at his post near the horseshoe cloister. Charlotte paused. Everyone else continued forward until they noticed she wasn't beside them anymore. She had stepped toward the guard, not running, not nervous, deliberate, almost instinctive. Her tiny hand lifted in a respectful little wave, not playful, not childish, a gesture of acknowledgement, one leader to another. The guard's eyes stayed forward, trained never to break stance. But there was a flicker, the slightest softening, and then Charlotte spoke, just loud enough to carry in the quiet courtyard. "Thank you for protecting us." Simple words, but they landed like something ancient had just been awakened. Royal children greet guards. It's tradition, but a thank you, with sincerity and understanding of duty at her age, that was different. The guard didn't answer. Protocol wouldn't allow it. But something unspoken passed between them. A strange, still moment where palace staff and guards alike felt it. Duty recognized. Respect exchanged. Legacy seen not forced, but natural. Later, that same guardsman would remark privately, "She looked at me like she understood what the uniform meant. Some adults don't do that." William overheard. He shared a small, proud smile. Half father, half future king recognizing the gravity of the moment. Catherine only brushed a hand gently over Charlotte's hair. Not surprised, just quietly moved, as though she had always known who her daughter would become. Because Charlotte wasn't learning royal duty. She was born breathing it. And from that day, something shifted in palace hallways. More eyes noticed. More whispers circled. The little girl with the brave gaze wasn't just another royal child. Staff began calling her, with affectionate awe, the little lioness, a nod to the lion on the royal crest, and to the spirit that roared softly inside her. A title awakens, deep in royal archives, where dust gathers on forgotten roles and ancient honors sleep in velvet. There was a title, untouched for decades, a title only bestowed when history recognized a rare force, a royal child destined not to simply exist in monarchy, but to shape it. And King Charles, historian at heart, guardian of tradition, had already made up his mind. Princess Charlotte's name would rise again in history books, not because of birthright alone, but because the crown had seen her spirit. And soon, the world would too. Windsor had always been a place where kings grew quiet and history breathed louder than men. Stone walls, ancient courtyards, and corridors where whispers outlived the people who spoke them. And in the middle of all this, the child with a determined stride and bright eyes that seemed to study everything. Princess Charlotte didn't toddle through the palace like a carefree royal. She observed. She absorbed. She moved with a kind of gentle purpose, the way children do when they don't yet understand destiny, but somehow feel it brushing their shoulder. It wasn't long before palace staff began noticing something unusual. Where most children giggled through rehearsed curtsies, Charlotte practiced them until they felt right, not perfect, but authentic. Where others might run past guards without a glance, she would nod, offer tiny words of kindness, or simply stand silently in respect. A tradition revived not by rules but by instinct. One afternoon, during a private family gathering at Windsor's lower ward, Charlotte stood near a window overlooking the quadrangle. The changing of the guard was beginning. Brass gleaming, drums echoing, boots striking stone in perfect unison. Most children would rush closer for excitement. Charlotte stood still, hands clasped behind her small back, head slightly lifted, mirroring the stance of her father when he observes military ceremony. A lady-in-waiting whispered to Catherine. She watches like she's being trained for something. Catherine didn't answer. She only smiled, the soft, secret smile of a mother who sees the future before anyone else does. As the final drum roll faded and the courtyard emptied, Charlotte made a quiet gesture that stunned everyone nearby. She placed her hand over her heart, a movement nobody had taught her, and whispered something only her mother caught. I want to take care of them too. Not protect me. Not I like the soldiers. But take care of them. Responsibility, empathy, leadership, all wrapped into a sentence spoken by a child who still needed help tying her shoes. In royal history, such awareness doesn't appear often. And when it does, the monarchy pays attention. From that day, subtle changes were made. Not dramatic public lessons. Not forced royal training. But quiet exposure to duty. Watching military rehearsals from a private corner, not to be impressed, but to understand. Listening as William explained why the guards stand for hours, not just how. Learning that a crown isn't worn for power, but for service. And then came the moment that sealed it. A private ceremony, no cameras, no fanfare. Just family, and a vow whispered not by a monarch, but a little girl with the poise of a future one. A silent promise to the crown she would someday represent. Not because she must, but because she wanted to. And someone else saw it too, an older royal guard, one who'd served through 3 reigns and carried memories like medals across his heart. He would soon speak words that reached the king himself, words that made the palace realize. Charlotte's destiny wasn't written by birth. She was writing it herself. The palace had seen generations of royals pass under its high archways, some cheerful, some solemn, and some who carried destiny like a shadow at their heels. But rarely had they seen it shine through someone so young. The guard who noticed Charlotte most was Sergeant Major Rowan, a man who had served under the late Queen, stood frozen in duty as Britain mourned her, and saluted with pride as King Charles ascended the throne. Old school, disciplined, and a believer that service was not a job, but a calling. He had seen princes mischievous, princesses playful, and royals who barely noticed the uniformed figures who guarded their world. But Charlotte? She saw them. One chilly morning, mist curling off the stone grounds like something ancient rising to stretch its limbs. Charlotte paused before Rowan. No ceremony, no cameras, just a child and a soldier. She didn't bow. She didn't wave. She simply looked at him, steady, curious, respectful, and then softly asked, "Do your feet hurt when you stand so long?" Rowan blinked, the question catching him off guard more than any breach of discipline ever had. "Yes, your Royal Highness," he answered gently. "It is part of serving." Charlotte nodded, her brow furrowing not with sadness, but understanding, real understanding. Then she whispered, almost as though she was speaking to herself, "When I have duties, I'll remember what you do. Not if, when," a child speaking not a possibility, but inevitability. Rowan felt something shift. The same spark he had seen long ago in another royal child with sharp eyes and quiet confidence. Prince William. As Charlotte walked away, her little footsteps echoing off the courtyard stones, Rowan's chest tightened with emotion he hadn't expected. Later that evening, over a quiet cup of tea in the guardroom, he shared the moment with a fellow officer. It wasn't gossip. It was reverence, a soldier recognizing a future sovereign spirit. Word traveled gently, as stories do in old royal halls, carried not by scandal, but by respect. From guard to officer, officer to equerry, equerry to private secretary, and eventually to the king. When King Charles heard the story, he didn't respond immediately. He simply stared out the window, the same way his mother once did when contemplating the future of the crown. A memory crosses his face, the late Queen's steady voice telling him long ago, "Duty reveals itself early in those born to hold it." And in that moment, Charles understood something deeply. Charlotte wasn't simply part of the next generation of royals. She was a bridge, a living echo of the past and a promise for the future. A little girl who would one day carry more than jewels and titles. She would carry people's hearts. The oath she whispered in silence, and the guard's quiet testimony had sealed something ancient. The crown had already chosen her, long before the crown ever touched her head. And somewhere in the king's private study, a document remained tucked away under royal seal, waiting for the day it would announce a title history thought would never rise again. A title meant only for the rarest of royal spirits. A title Charlotte had already begun to earn. Kings rarely make decisions in a single moment. Crown and duty do not rush. They weigh, they wait, they watch. And King Charles, a man shaped by decades in the shadow of destiny, is perhaps the monarch who understands time better than any sovereign before him. He learned patience not simply from royal tradition, but from a lifetime observing a queen who ruled not with thunder, but with steady light. So when whispers reach him about Princess Charlotte, about her poise, her compassion, the instinctive reverence she showed toward duty, he didn't react as a grandfather first. He reacted as the king. He closed the doors to his private study, the same quiet room where he signed state documents, where history unfolds on polished wood and scarlet leather, a place where silence isn't empty. It hums with decisions that shape nations. He sat at his desk, fingers lightly touching a folder embossed with the royal crest. Inside it, a parchment slept, older than his reign, older even than his memory. A title once given not by tradition alone, but by recognition of greatness. A title pulled from the deepest well of royal history, reserved only for those destined to become symbols, not simply sovereigns. It had not been bestowed in a lifetime, nor expected again. Yet here he was. In front of him lay three names who had held it before. Three legends. Three women who shaped a monarchy in quiet, powerful ways. A princess who became the fortress behind a king in wartime. A royal daughter who served hospitals when bombs fell. A sovereign who held a nation together for 70 years. Alongside these names, space waited. Not blank, expectant. He lifted his pen slowly. Not out of ceremony, but reverence. Because to bestow this honor early would mean something profound. It would mean he wasn't simply preparing Charlotte for royal life. He was acknowledging she had already begun to live it. And there, in the solitude only monarchs truly understand, he paused, remembering moments others never saw. Charlotte leaning toward grieving crowds during Queen Elizabeth's procession, her hand reaching instinctively for George's when emotion overwhelmed him. The way she stood, not like a child wanting attention, but like a young guardian holding a nation's sorrow with grace beyond her years. He exhaled, slow, steady, resolute. The monarchy had always been shaped by men whose names echoed loudly, but its endurance, its strength, more often than not, it was carried by women, quiet, steady, unshaken. Charlotte was not future royalty. She was future legacy. Charles signed. Ink flowed like fate in motion. A forgotten title now belonged to a child who was becoming a symbol, not of privilege, but of responsibility. But he did not announce it yet. History requires timing. Ceremony requires meaning. Destiny requires patience. And before the world would hear it, there was one moment left, a moment that would test Charlotte's spirit under pressure, in the most public place a royal child could stand. The balcony, trooping the color, a crowd of thousands, eyes of the world, and a test she didn't even know she was facing. Trooping the color isn't just a parade. It's tradition wearing scarlet. It's history marching in time. And for the royal family, it's a stage where the world silently measures the future of the crown. That year, the air held a different electricity. Crowds pressed against gates. Flags waved like restless tides, and military drums echoed to them all like the heartbeat of Britain itself. But inside Buckingham Palace, something quieter, heavier, simmered beneath the polished excitement. Today was the day King Charles would watch a child, not for innocence but for readiness. As the family gathered, Charlotte stood near the window, peering at the sweep of scarlet uniforms below. She wasn't bouncing with childish thrill. She was studying, shoulders back, chin lifted slightly, eyes focused, the same look her great-grandmother had when she assessed regiments with the weight of a continent on her shoulders. A footman whispered to an equerry, "She looks like she's already wearing something more than a ribbon." And perhaps she was. Not a crown, but expectation, responsibility, a legacy humming quietly at her side. When the palace door swung open and the family stepped onto the balcony, the roar from the crowd rushed upward like the release of centuries. Charlotte blinked only once, then stepped out, steady as a sunrise. George glanced at her, seeking silent reassurance. She gave a tiny nod, confident, grounding. Louis tugged at her sleeve, wide-eyed and curious. She shifted subtly, placing a gentle hand behind him so he wouldn't wander too far, instinctively protective, instinctively royal. The guards below presented arms. Cannons thundered. Drums rolled like distant storms. And while cameras hunted expressions, searching for memes or mishaps, Charlotte's eyes stayed focused forward, sharp, reverent, calm. In that ocean of cheers and spectacle, she did something startlingly small, yet enormous in meaning. She placed her hand over her heart, just as she had once done in silence at Windsor, a gesture seen by millions, but understood by very few. King Charles saw. William saw. Catherine's breath caught in her chest, pride flickering through her eyes like candlelight. Behind Charlotte, Charles leaned slightly toward the queen consort and whispered something unheard by the crowd. But a lip reader later caught the words, carried by fate into public conversation. She has it. Not talent, not charm, not composure. It, the rare, unteachable quality that makes a monarch not by birth, but by spirit. In that instant, Charles knew his quiet decision in the study had been right. The parchment with Charlotte's new ancient royal title wasn't just a formality. It was prophecy. He stepped forward, placing his hand gently on her shoulder. A simple touch. But those who understood monarchy knew. That was a signal, a passing of recognition, a king acknowledging the future before all of Britain. The crowd didn't know why they cheered louder in that moment, but they felt something shift, a thread of destiny tightening, a new chapter of monarchy coming into view. The world saw a little girl, the crown saw a leader, and somewhere deep in the palace, an aide quietly updated an official record. Princess Charlotte, future holder of a title given only to royal legends. Not announced yet, but chosen. Next came the moment the nation would finally hear it, and the words King Charles spoke would echo across generations. Buckingham Palace had witnessed coronations, tragedies, victories, and echoes of ancient ceremony, but tonight felt different. There was no glittering banquet, no roaring crowd, just a quiet winter dusk settling over London, snowflakes floating like whispered blessings from history itself. Inside the palace, Princess Charlotte stood near the tall windows, her palms pressed gently against the cold glass. Below, rows of royal guards lined the courtyard, uniforms crisp, expressions solemn, as if guarding the moment itself. She had seen royal duty before, but never like this. Every step she took felt like walking deeper into a legacy far older than kings and queens. A soft knock, then King Charles entered, his pace careful, his eyes kind, holding years of wisdom and a hint of sadness. He wasn't just a monarch tonight. He was a grandfather looking at the future of everything he had ever protected. "Charlotte," he said softly, voice steady but heavy with meaning, "there are moments in our family where history chooses someone, not for their crown, but for their character." Charlotte swallowed. The weight of his words pressed gently against her heart, not crushing, but shaping. She didn't feel fear. She felt calling. Charles approached her. "You have shown compassion, strength, dignity, even when the world watched too closely. That is why tonight you receive a destiny reserved only for legends." A silence followed, not empty, but sacred. Charlotte blinked slowly. "I'm ready." Or was she? The world would soon know. The palace corridors hummed with quiet movement, advisors pacing softly, guards standing a little taller, as if every uniform thread knew this night would be written into history books. Yet, in the heart of it all, Charlotte felt a rare calm. Not the calm of silence, but the calm of purpose. William and Kate entered next. No ceremony, just parents who looked at their daughter with eyes filled with both pride and awe. Kate's voice carried warmth, the kind that wrapped itself around Charlotte like a soft blanket. "You've always had a strength beyond your years," she whispered. "But tonight isn't about responsibility. It's about who you are. You lead with kindness, and that is greater than any crown." William placed a gentle hand on Charlotte's shoulder. "Remember, royalty isn't measured by titles, but by heart, and yours has always been steady." Charlotte exhaled slowly, absorbing their words. She didn't choose this life, but she chose how she would live it. Then came the moment. A senior royal herald stepped forward, holding a velvet box, deep crimson, embroidered with an ancient crest almost forgotten by time. Gasps echoed softly among the gathered staff. Charlotte's heartbeat picked up, not in fear, in acceptance. King Charles nodded once. This title has been untouched for generations, reserved only for the rarest spirit, one who carries duty not as a burden, but as a gift. The velvet lid lifted. Hidden legacy unveiled. The air itself seemed to bow. The box opened slowly, as if time itself respected the gravity of this moment. Inside, resting on white silk, was a small golden insignia, an emblem older than the modern monarchy, older even than many European crowns. The crest of the shielded heir, a title whispered only in the oldest royal archives, given only once, centuries ago, to a young royal who protected the kingdom through compassion, wisdom, and unity. A title not of ruling, but of safeguarding. Gasps rippled through the silent hall. Charlotte blinked, realization dawning. This was no ordinary royal honor. This was a vow, a promise to protect not just the crown, but the people. King Charles's voice softened, almost trembling with emotion. The tone not a king, but a man proud of the future he saw before him. "This title," he said, "is not given for age, nor for rank, but for spirit. In every trial, you have shown grace. When others sought attention, you chose humility. You carry empathy as your strength. That is why history chooses you now." Charlotte lowered her gaze, tears threatening but held with royal poise. She wasn't overwhelmed. She was transformed. Kate squeezed her hand. William stood tall beside her. Charlotte stepped forward, not as a child, not as a princess, simply born to a throne, but as a young leader stepping into destiny. Charles placed the insignia in her palm. "The United Kingdom's future does not rest only on crowns," he whispered. "It rests on hearts brave enough to protect it." And in that moment, the halls of history welcomed a new legend. The palace balcony doors opened. A soft winter wind swept through, carrying the smell of snow and the distant hum of gathered crowds. Lights glimmered across London, like stars grounded on earth. Charlotte stepped out. The world paused. There was no crown on her head, no heavy regalia, only the small insignia glimmering at her chest, a symbol far more powerful than a jewel. The royal guards raised their swords in silent salute, an honor reserved only for sovereigns and history-shaping heirs. Whispers rose in the crowd below. Is this the moment? King Charles spoke to the nation, voice firm, full of reverence. Tonight, we honor Princess Charlotte as the shielded heir, a title bestowed only upon those destined not just to inherit, but to protect, a royal not defined by power, but by compassion. The crowd erupted, not in cheers alone, but in warmth, in admiration, in hope. Charlotte didn't wave like a child. Instead, she placed her hand gently over her heart, a gesture of promise, of service, of legend. Beside her, William and Kate exchanged proud glances. Their daughter wasn't just stepping into history. She was shaping it. And as snow fell like blessings from 1,000 years of monarchs before her, Charlotte smiled, not for cameras, for her future, a future already written in the quiet dignity of her heart, a future sealed tonight as destiny became legend. And that is how a young princess stepped beyond crowns and titles and into the legacy of legends, not by birthright alone, but by grace, humility, and an unshakable spirit. If you believe Princess Charlotte's future will inspire the world, tap that like button, share this story with fellow royal watchers, and subscribe for more heartfelt royal narratives. Because some royal tales aren't just history, they're hope.